Not the buttons! Not the gumdrop buttons! Hello everyone and welcome to episode number 75 of Movies Are Awesome, the show all about coupon clipping. My name is Nathan Pottle and thank you for joining me today, and it is episode number 75. That is crazy, kind of a milestone number here. It seems like it was not that long ago that I did the 50th episode, and now here I am at 75 already, so that's awesome. So obviously I'm going to keep going, keep making them. I really enjoy doing this podcast, and I hope that those of you who listen really enjoy as well. We're actually getting really close to 3,000 downloads for the show as a whole, which I know for a lot of other shows is probably really small potatoes, but hey, for me, who just kind of puts it out there for anyone to find, I don't think that's too bad. Being almost at 3,000 downloads on 75 episodes, I think that is pretty cool. So once again, thank you for being a faithful listener, because I really do appreciate it. Next week, I've got my Mulan review. We watched it over the weekend here, and I'm ready to talk about Mulan next week, but this week I'm talking about the New Mutants. So as always, I'm going to do non-spoilers first and then move into spoilers. There's not a whole lot to spoil in this movie, but I'm still going to do the spoiler section anyway. No point in wasting any more time, though. First thing I want to talk about is that we were supposed to get this movie a long time ago. In April of 2018 is when this movie was originally supposed to be released, and it was pushed back 4 times. And I'm just going to go through all of those times and why it was pushed back really quickly. So the first time it was pushed back, the first time it was pushed back is because they were doing extensive reshoots and reshooting a whole lot of this movie. So it got pushed back from April 2018 to February 2019. And then that was around the same time that Deadpool 2 was coming out. So they pushed it back again to avoid coming out at the same time as Deadpool 2 and really affecting their box office numbers. And then Disney bought Fox, so it got pushed back again while all of the deals of Disney buying Fox and all of the little details were being worked out. So it was pushed back because of that. And then this spring we had the coronavirus, so it was pushed back again. And now finally we get to see it. So for over 2 years, we've had to wait extra long, I guess, to see this movie. And now it's here. People can go and watch it. And it's not very good. Now I could just close this up and say like, hey, that's it. That's done for the review. It's not good and not worth seeing. But I want to talk a little bit deeper about it though. So what is the story of New Mutants? It is set in the X-Men universe, and basically what this is young mutants who are just manifesting their abilities but have no control over their power, have been taken to this facility. Now it's kind of like a mental institution of sorts, or some kind of establishment similar to it. The woman in charge of this is either a nurse or a doctor or something like that, and so she is helping these children work through their problems and then also develop their powers and abilities so that they can have control. And then it's revealed that there's something else going on here, and not only are there things going on with the school, but there are things going on within each of these individual kids, and their abilities manifest in different ways, and they have different powers, and we get to kind of explore that, kind of. Now, last I checked, this movie is around 20% on Rotten Tomatoes. I haven't checked in a bit, though. Now, a lot of people will see a number that low and think that it means that it's just a horrible, horrible movie that it's not worth watching at all. That's not what that means. I don't think I've ever kind of addressed it on the show before, but what Rotten Tomatoes is an aggregator of reviews. So it doesn't mean that only 20% of the movie is good and the other 80% is bad. That's not what a Rotten Tomatoes score is. What it is 20% of the critics gave it positive reviews and the other 80% did not. So it's kind of a mass market appeal number, as opposed to this movie is only a 2 out of 10. That's not what that number is. It means that out of every 10 critics, 2 of them liked the movie, and the other 8 said, no, this movie is not that good. But of those 8 who didn't like it, some of them could have given the movie a 5 out of 10. Some could have given them a 1 out of 10, right? So it doesn't really mean that it's a horrible movie. It just means that it doesn't have a very broad appeal and not a lot of people liked it. I personally don't think this is a 2 out of 10 movie. I think it's like a 5 or a 6. I try to avoid giving movies numbers. I like to more go, did I like it or did I not like it? Is it worth watching or is it not worth watching? For New Mutants, I'm going to say it's not worth watching, and I'm going to get into some of these reasons here. And let's talk about the cast first, okay? So we've got the main character of Dani, and I don't know the actress who plays her. And then we have Maisie Williams, Anya Taylor-Joy, and also the brother Jonathan from Stranger Things. I also don't know his name either. Maybe I should have looked it up, but I didn't. So here we are. My phone is in the other room. I tend to not keep it on me when I'm recording just so it doesn't distract me, So I'm not going to look things up today. But this is who these characters are. So Dani, the main character, she has powers but doesn't really know what her powers are, and her journey is trying to figure out what is going on within herself and how she can use her powers for the betterment of everyone. Maisie Williams, everyone knows her from Game of Thrones. She plays Arya. In this one, she is a girl who can turn into a wolf, I think, a wolf or a dog or some kind of four-legged animal that can kill people. Anya Taylor-Joy, I'm confused about what her powers exactly are, and I'm going to talk about it more in the spoiler section. And then we have the Stranger Things kid, who his ability is he can vibrate really fast and fly around and be powerful. There isn't an exact classification for it. I'm sure there is actually, but I don't know what it is. And then there's a kid from Brazil who can turn on fire. So you have these kids inside this facility and they're trying to be friends or trying not to be friends, or there's tension and friction and racism and all kinds of things going on with these kids. And then there's the nurse lady, and she's just trying to get them to control their powers so that she can then send them off to another school where they can be safely integrated with other kids. And initially, this movie was marketed as a horror film, and if you watch the original trailers, it's supposed to be very, very scary. The later trailers are a little lighter, so I think one of the reasons that it went to reshoots in the first place is because it was too scary and intense, and they were dialing it back a little bit. And I think they wanted to tone it down just a tad. This movie is PG-13. There were rumors of it being rated R initially. And let me talk about that for just a second, because I've seen people online saying, hey, this movie was only PG-13. It would have been way better if it was rated R. And let me just say that that's not true. Having just more blood and violence in this movie would not have solved the script issues. It wouldn't have solved the acting issues. It wouldn't have solved kind of the goofy nature of the story. Fixing the story would have made this movie better. I've seen lots of PG-13 movies that are phenomenal and are way better than rated R movies. Making a movie more violent and having people swear more doesn't make a movie better. Not for a second. But circling it back to being a horror, if this movie is supposed to be a horror, it's not very scary. If this movie is supposed to be introspective on the mental health of people manifesting abilities, it's not very introspective. So whatever this movie is trying to be, and based off of watching the movie, I don't know what it's trying to be. It's just not whatever they're shooting for. And that might be just because they're trying to check a bunch of boxes off, and I think that there are a lot of boxes this movie is trying to check off. It's trying to appeal to a broad audience. It's trying to be inclusive to everyone. It's trying to set up a franchise. It's trying to tie into other movies. It's doing all of these things and failing at most of them because it's not taking the time to be its own thing. And I have had thoughts about doing an entire episode about that. When it comes to movie universes and you're putting the cart before the horse, you're not focusing on making a good movie. I have an idea to do an entire episode just focused on that. And if I were to do that, then New Mutants would be definitely something that I bring up to talk about, because that's what they're trying to do. The Amazing Spider-Man movies are also really good examples of trying to make something greater and focusing too much on your bigger universe as opposed to the story that you're telling within this film. Why don't I talk about some of the performances? Like, half the cast are doing silly accents and they don't sound very good. Like, Anya Taylor-Joy is supposed to be Russian, I think, and her Russian accent is kind of goofy. The kid from Stranger Things is like from Kentucky and his accent is really goofy. Macy Williams is, I think, supposed to be Scottish or something like that, Scottish or Irish, and it feels like, and then this might be her actual voice. I don't know what her actual voice is, but I think her accent was probably the best of the voices within the movie. But overall, it was very distracting to hear everyone talking in such different accents. But then the kid from Brazil is talking like just any white kid. So I don't know why that kid didn't need an accent, but everyone else did. Not 100% sure. But then you have the main character of Danny, and she's going through this journey of self-discovery of who she is and what her powers are, and it's just not particularly engaging. And in order to kind of explain what I mean by not engaging, I want to compare this to another movie. If you've seen Glass, which also has Anya Taylor-Joy in it, Glass is the follow-up movie to Unbreakable and Split, and kind of the third in this trilogy. Now, it kind of has a similar concept in the sense that these superpowered beings are in this institution and are trying to work through their mental instability. And in the case of Glass, they're trying to be convinced that they actually don't have any kind of powers at all. Now, Glass is very similar to New Mutants in the sense that it is trying to be a lot more thought-provoking than it actually is. And I think the big reason that this fails, that Glass and New Mutants both fail, is that at the end of the movie, the climax of the film is just a big, messy battle sequence. And we don't really get any kind of emotional climax. It's just a physical battle that people get to watch. And that's a huge problem for the ending of New Mutants, is that any kind of credibility, which is not that much, by the way, any kind of credibility that the movie has gained in trying to be thought-provoking and interesting is completely wiped from the table once this final battle sequence takes place. So what they should have done is instead go for something more like what Glass did, is instead reach for more, have this movie be more like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which, if you haven't seen it, won Best Picture in the 1970s. I can't remember the exact year, 75, I think. Not 100% sure, but that's a Jack Nicholson movie, and he's in a mental institution, and the nurse is evil, and they are working on their own problems, but then also trying to get away from this crazy nurse who is just completely abusing her power as the nurse of this hospital. And that movie is really thought-provoking and tragic and heartbreaking, and that's what New Mutants is missing. There's nothing particularly tragic about it other than, like, there's a tragic backstory, but there's nothing going on within the film itself that makes me really care, that makes me really invested. It's just so middle of the road. It feels like they were trying to do something interesting, but also playing it safe at the same time, and it just doesn't work. One more thing that I want to mention before getting into the spoiler section is the visual effects for this movie is kind of hit and miss. In the big final battle, there's some stuff that looks really good, but for the most part, I think it's kind of mediocre visual effects. And there are these creatures that have no eyes and big pointy teeth that are like lumbering around, and it just looks super, super fake. So that's kind of all the things about this movie, non-spoiler, that I want to talk about, except for the fact that at the beginning of the movie, when we had the 20th Century Fox fanfare, and we go around as like instead of saying 20th Century Fox, it now says 20th Century Studios, which I found to be a very interesting change. What a fun little twist. And that's just because Disney bought Fox, and now the name of Fox doesn't really exist anymore. So they're now 20th Century Studios. And then also, one thing that I noticed at the end of the film is when I was watching the credits, Stan Lee was credited as an executive producer, and I was thinking to myself, that doesn't seem right because he died, but then thinking back, this movie was made so long ago that he was alive at the time of this film's production. So, of course, he would be an executive producer. And I kind of facepalmed a little bit. Oh, yeah, this movie was supposed to come out over 2 years ago. So that's why Stan Lee's name is in the credits there. I'm going to move into spoilers now. It's not going to be a very long conversation because there's not a lot to ruin in this movie. But I feel like I've been saying some good stuff and squeezing some content out of this pitiful little movie. So here we go into spoilers right now. I'm going to talk about the giant bear at the end. Now, this movie is based off of the Demon Bear series of New Mutants that was written by Greg Rucka, I think. And I haven't read it, but it's kind of silly watching like a big smoke bear chewing people up and eating them. And it's meant to be this allegory for Danny's character, and she's feeding her fear within her, and so her power is manifesting in the way of this giant bear, and then she confronts her fear and takes control of the bear, and then shrinks it down, and then they win. This is very similar to the end of Moana, where she faces down the lava monster, and then she turns into like the good green goddess or whatever. Except in the case of New Mutants, it's done far, far worse. I didn't like it at all. It just felt really dragged out. And I think this movie is less than 2 hours, but it felt like they were really trying to stretch that runtime for as long as they could, because they just didn't have enough story to tell, I guess. And then it falls into the cliche of, oh, the power to save us was inside you all along. Wonderful, amazing. So good. One thing that I did find interesting, though, is that this movie clearly connects to Logan. It's when it's revealed that the nurse is working for this evil corporation and she's training them to be these weapons of mass destruction, these killer children. It's like Danny has visions of this other facility with these killer kids, and we see that, and the footage that we see is the exact footage of the killer kids in the facility in Logan. So this movie very clearly ties into Logan. It would have come out the year after Logan, because it was 2017 and this one 2018, and then we would have had Dark Phoenix in 2019. Now, I haven't seen Dark Phoenix, but I hear it's awful. So I have no interest in watching X-Men Dark Phoenix for a while. I'll maybe eventually get to it, but I'm not interested at all. And that's the thing about these X-Men movies, is that they're so hit and miss. The first X-Men and X-Men 2 United, Days of Future Past, Logan, all of these movies are phenomenal. But for each one of those, you have an X-Men The Last Stand, or X-Men Origins Wolverine, or The Wolverine, or New Mutants, or X-Men Apocalypse, or X-Men Dark Phoenix. Like, there's so many bad X-Men movies that I just have trouble getting invested in them, getting into them, and so I'm not rushing to the theater every time something comes out. With the exception of New Mutants, I went to go see it right away, and that's just because I'm in withdrawals of not going seeing movies in theaters, so I had to go see something, and after Tenet, the only other option was New Mutants. So here I am talking about it on the show. Let's talk about Anya Taylor-Joy's powers. Now, it seems for the most part, X-Men get one ability. In the case of Danny, it's her magical bear that feeds off of the fear of other people. Macy Williams turns into a dog. The guy from Brazil turns on fire. But Anya Taylor-Joy, it seems like she can turn her arm into metal and have a big sword. She has a dragon. She can teleport by going into this other dimension that she created. It seems like she's just super powerful and has a lot of different things that she can do. I'm not exactly sure why she has so many things going on, because for the most part, like, you can only do one thing. You know, Professor X can go into your brain. Wolverine can heal really quickly, and he has these claws. So I guess that's two things right there. I'm starting to see in my mind now how this is not a very good argument or worth talking about. So I'm gonna drop it. She has a lot of powers, and I guess I've just convinced myself that I'm okay with it. I will move on then. Like I was saying, when this movie is trying to be a horror movie but isn't really a horror movie, none of the characters died. Like, they all lived except for the evil doctor. So generally in horror movies, a character or two will die in order to help raise the stakes, but all of them seem to have this plot armor and all of them made it out okay. And then off they went into the sunset at the end of the movie. So there, you need to have a little bit of tension here. Maybe have somebody die in your horror movie would help ratchet up the tension. But I guess that's not how this is going to work. And then we have the biggest question of, is this going to turn into a franchise? Is this going to connect into further X-Men movies? The answer to that is no, for a couple different reasons. One, because this movie is going to make no money. Two, because Disney now owns Fox, and they're going to try to integrate the X-Men into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and kind of every X-Men movie that has ever existed is no longer going to be an existing continuity. We're going to move into X-Men being part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then move on to new castings and new direction, and Kevin Feige will save us and give us good X-Men movies, and hopefully good Fantastic Four movies as well, because we have not had a single good Fantastic Four movie, and they're really interesting. If you read some Fantastic Four comics, they are really great and have this family dynamic, and every single version that we've had of them on screen is supremely disappointing. I think that's going to be pretty much it for today, though. Looking back at my notes, I talked about everything that I wanted to talk about. So, closing up here, I'm going to say New Mutants is not worth watching, at least not going to the theater and paying for it to see. I think this is eventually going to end up on Disney+, so if you have that, just stick around and wait for it to be on there if you want to watch it. I don't recommend going to the theater for this experience. What I'm going to ask you guys, though, is did you see the New Mutants? Did you enjoy it? Am I off base on this movie? I would love to hear your opinions on it, so feel free to reach out to me on social media. You can find me on Twitter at PottleNathan, and you can find the show on Instagram at Movies Are Awesome Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to subscribe to the show. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and a whole bunch of other places. Once again, thank you for listening to today's episode number 75. It's crazy that I've made it this far, and I'm going to keep going for as long as I can. Stay tuned for next week's episode when I talk about Mulan, and as always, if you have nothing else to do, go watch more movies.